What's up, guys? Hope you are well. Hope you're having a great week wherever you are. If you're not having a great week, keep on pushing through. I'm sure it's going to come good for you. A couple of updates before we dive into this episode, and this episode is a really tasty one. It's with a guy called Charlie Light, who is building a $1.2 million a year content agency, and it all kind of started as a meme account on Twitter, a bit of a joke. Finance memes. The account is called John Rich. You may have seen it if you're on Twitter. Super interesting episode if you're interested in what hits on that platform, if you're interested in building a content agency, and particularly at the moment he's struggling with scaling or grappling with scaling because he's currently at 40k a month and he wants to get it to 100k a month. So super interesting episode. Couple of updates. One thing you can help me with is I've reached out to 5 male entrepreneurs for this podcast and all 5 have said yes. I've reached out to 5 female entrepreneurs and creators for this podcast and only 1 has said yes so far. So I don't know if that says more about the way I'm reaching out to people or the male and female psyche and ego, but I need your help. If you know any female entrepreneurs or creators, send me a DM if you think they might be up for coming on the podcast. Second thing, business update. I've gone down the content agency route. Really enjoying it. Creating podcast clips, social clips for TikTok. Also doing ads for some brands, Facebook ads, that kind of stuff. General social video. But I have a couple of clients at the moment and I have a couple of clients who are going to sign imminently. So if you're interested, particularly in podcasts like business, startup type podcast and creating content on social media, then get in touch with me because I need help. I'm hiring and just would love to chat to you. So last thing is hope you enjoy the episode. Give it a subscribe if you're on YouTube and a like, and hope you enjoy.
All right, we're recording, so let's dive in. Charlie Light, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for making time.
Yeah, thank you.
I came across your story. Basically, you've taken a Twitter meme account, a really funny one, John W. Rich. I think 170k followers it's on now. And along the way, it blossomed and turned into a content agency that is doing, I think, like almost $40,000 a month right now, right?
Yeah, it was 39,000 in April, right around there.
Which is just wild. Can we go back to starting this meme account in 2020? What was going through your head?
Yeah, so I had another job at the time. I was basically working in finance, and I started the account in April 2020, and that's about 2 weeks after everything was locked down because of COVID. So I had a lot more free time on my hands. Basically all the restaurants, everything was closed. We were just sitting at home 24 hours a day because there's nothing to do besides maybe walk around a bit. So I had followed a bunch of Twitter accounts for the last 3 or 4 years. I'd usually a couple times a week check out Twitter, check out some of the parody accounts, the business and finance news. So I was pretty familiar with Twitter, but I just had never written anything on there. So April 2020, I had the perfect chance I'll start my own account just for fun, see what happens. I don't remember exactly why I had the idea for the old guy. I think I just had that in my head already because I don't think I spent very much time thinking about what my account would be. I just knew, hey, make a old executive who just lucks into success even though he doesn't know what he's doing. So I just found a picture of an old business guy, came up with that name, John Rich. Originally, I had it as John Rich and then in parentheses, wealthy. So I would usually, the start of it was trolling people and basically commenting on everyone's posts and saying, hey, I'm actually as a wealthy tech exec, and then just say something that was completely wrong. And that got a lot of people pissed off at me and got me a pretty big following right away just because I troll everyone. People would read it and at first be pissed off, but then realize it's a joke. And then so it's funny, I actually had a lot of people who would be super pissed at me at first, and then later they'd follow me and I'd end up talking with them. So I figured this would just be something I did on the side just for funds, and it worked out like that for a few weeks. I figured I would just do it for a few weeks and move on to something else, or I'd just do it every once in a while for fun. But within the first month or so, it got to about 5,000 followers, which is pretty cool. So just from there, I just kept at it. It really was not a business in 2020, in that first year. It was just something I did for fun, but I did it basically all my free time. I was on there figuring out how to grow on Twitter, figuring out what kind of stuff did well.
Was this the first time you'd ever done a meme account or any kind of like social page? Because there are these people who like make a career out of building kind of like theme pages, and they have a footprint and a history of it. Or was it just completely new to you?
Yeah, as far as meme pages, I think I'd never really run any sort of meme page or anything like that. I was in group messages with friends and we joke around a lot. So I think that's maybe where I developed more of my sense of humor in terms of creating memes. But no, I never had done it before that. And I think there was a learning process at the beginning. It's not, I just knew exactly what to do from the start. There were some things I realized that I shouldn't do. I think in the beginning too, I was probably too aggressive. It's a good thing. You have to be a bit aggressive to grow a new account on Twitter just because you need people to notice it. But I think I went a little overboard and pissed off too many people. What I realized, especially as my account has gotten really big, is you have to be pretty selective of who you go after. So now, especially that it's a big account, I can't really go after someone unless they totally deserve it. Or you can always punch up too, so I can always make fun of billionaires or politicians, but I can't really just go after random people on Twitter. So that's something I did learn.
Yeah. Yeah, the punching up is one I've heard before. Like that's a strategy that works well, right? In general. But if you're punching someone who's not really got so much to show for themselves, can be a bit unfair. But when you say things have gone wrong or you went too heavy-handed, has anything ever happened where you've been banned or where you've had? Because you're doing this anonymously as well. How does that work?
Yeah, so I would say one of the lessons I had to learn was, so there's that account Ramp Capital, which is hugely popular, the original FinTwit account. I don't know exactly. That's what a lot of people say. I wasn't really around when FinTwit started, but initially I would go after him and his replies to get my initial following. But then after a while, I realized he was getting pretty sick of it. So even if you're punching up to a larger account, I think if you make a joke at their expense a few times, it can be funny. But if you're just doing it constantly, if you do it dozens of times, that person's probably just going to get sick of it and either block you or just not want to interact with you. So I realized you can joke about someone, make them the butt of the joke, maybe a couple times, but you should be doing it you should make yourself the joke just as often. So it's not like you're just constantly insulting them or making them the butt of the joke. So I had to figure out how to do that correctly, where I think a big part of growing on Twitter is finding other accounts that have an audience that you want to have and interacting with them regularly. But if you're constantly negative or making fun of them, then you might gain a reputation as someone who's fairly negative or as an account that is just an asshole and people won't want to associate with you for super long.
Yeah. No, I think that generally, like the stuff I see from John is fairly like self-deprecating and funny, so it hits that right chord. And I think probably the other master of that is like the Parik Patel account, which is again like it's like how would you describe him? But he's similarly self-deprecating and hilarious in his takes.
I think we have a similar sense of humor in that we kind of, if someone else messed up in the market, we're not always directly making fun of them. We're almost making fun of ourselves and them at the same time. One of the common jokes he always does is that when something like Luna blows up or any stock or any crypto, he's going to make a joke about how he was invested or how he went all in on it because of some random tip. So I think people appreciate that humor a lot more, where it's self-deprecating but also making fun of someone else, like making fun of the people who actually lost money in those fiascos, but he's not directly doing it, not directly kicking them while they're down.
Yeah.
And I think, and he's done a really good job with, he has such a broader appeal, I think. Obviously he has
400K, I think he's like 400K.
500. So
wow, yeah.
I think he's three or so times what I have. And I think the big difference was Wall Street Bets. Like last year during the GameStop stuff, he was on the front page of Wall Street Bets, like basically every single day. His sense of humor really translated well to that crowd. So I think that was a huge boost for him.
Yeah.
And I think all the FinTwit accounts, everyone really had that January and February of last year. All of us had a really big boost in growth, but I think Parikh, he kind of flew past almost everyone, because I think he was behind me for a while, and then it only took a month or two, and he, skyrocketed past almost every other account.
I think, he does. I came across him as well. I think just because he has that thing going with Chamath, where he like pretends he's his father or his grandfather. I can't quite remember what it is, but it's just like those kind of interactions where it's just so hilarious that you can't help but A, come across him because he's interacting with these huge personalities on the platform, but two, it's just like such a funny take that it's a must follow. I'm interested, when you're growing this following, and it's evolved into a business, when did you realize that you actually had a potential business on your hands?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I had experimented, I wanted it to be a business basically from the start. And in 2020, I experimented with a bunch of stuff. And the first few things just really didn't turn out to be businesses. So at the beginning, my idea was that, I'll have a website and I'll get views and I'll sell ads basically on the website. And I tried that out for a couple months. And even though I could get a lot of views on the website, I realized that the display ad route was not really a great one. You really need millions of views per month to actually make a good business out of it. Because I tried a few articles and they actually did pretty well. I got one that had, I think 70,000 views or something in a week. So it did really well, and considering my audience, I probably had 30,000 followers. So obviously it did really well, but then I looked at the ad revenue and it was basically a few bucks. It was $10 or $15 I made from that. So that was one of the big experiments I did, and quickly realized, okay, this is something that either has to have a really mass appeal that millions of people are going to read, or it's just not really going to be a viable business. So I think at the end of 2020 is when I started down the path that turned into a real business, where I realized that some people would actually pay me to help with their content. So someone reached out that it was actually the Hard Money account. They're like a finance satire page, and they were just starting up and basically said, hey, we'll pay you to help run our Twitter account, to help write some articles. So that was the first time I realized, okay, the most lucrative path here is probably to help other people with content. And so from there, I slowly experimented with other things. I worked for Hard Money for a while. Later in mid-2021, I took on other clients and experimented with how much to charge, how much time it would take. And even most of 2021, I just had a couple clients and was working a lot more closely with each of them. And then kind of end of 2021, beginning of this year, I experimented more with making it into a real business, with having, or at least a business besides just me consulting. And so that's when I started to say, okay, how can I take on more clients? How can I hire people to help out with the work? How profitable will that be? So I think the nice thing right now is that there's massive demand for people that want to put out good content, and they either don't know exactly how to do it on Twitter, or they're just too busy. Yeah. So most of my clients are people that already they're typically entrepreneurs or CEOs, founders, and they have good content somewhere, usually somewhere else, like a newsletter, YouTube, something like that, and they just haven't quite figured out Twitter, or they have figured out Twitter, but they want to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
And I think with Twitter, it's probably true for any social network, but you need to have certain rules that you know. And just since I've spent so much time on Twitter, I have a pretty good understanding of what works well on Twitter.
Yeah. What do your clients want then? Do they want just general growth, or do they specifically come to you for, we want to be doing memes, we want to have more humor in our content, or is it a blend of both?
Yeah, actually, that's something I talk about with my clients. The first thing before I work with them is I want to figure out, what does success look like? And there's a couple of things that my clients will say to that. So I think initially a lot of people think, oh, I want to have as many followers as possible. But then when we really talk about it, usually that's actually not such a good goal, because I think if you have a target audience in mind, you have to write specifically for them. So most of my clients, they basically want to use Twitter to network. They want to meet successful people, either investors or founders that they can invest in, or they want to meet business partners. So typically, if you want to meet people like that, you don't necessarily need to have a massive audience. Even so, my Twitter account's probably a good example of that, where I only have 5,000 followers, but I think my following is really valuable because a high percentage of those people are founders or CEOs. So I'd rather have that rather than 100,000 followers that are mostly beginners or don't really necessarily need to hire me. So there's a few things we usually look at for each client. So followers, I think, is important. You want to obviously be growing, but most of my clients, once we get into the content, realistically, if you're writing detailed things about whatever your subject matter is, you're not going to gain 10,000 or 20,000 followers in a month just because it's not mass appeal content. But if you want to model yourself after like Tai Lopez or Grant Cardone and write pretty general business things that almost anyone would understand, okay, then maybe gaining 10 or 20,000 followers in a month is a good goal, and just having the maximum amount of impressions is good.
Yeah.
So usually
it's the classic kind of, it's like the depth vs width thing. I've heard George Mack and Dickie Bush and people like that, they talk about this, where it's, do you want a big audience with very little engagement or actual genuine connection or value to you, or do you want maybe a smaller one where actually the depth of interaction is much higher, depth of engagement is much higher, and therefore potentially a lot more valuable audience?
Exactly. And that's one thing I've written about on Twitter is, I think that relates, is that a lot of people, when they're just starting out building content, they say, oh, I want to go viral. And that for some reason, that's become like the golden standard of, oh, the more likes this post gets, the better it is. And I usually think that's a pretty bad goal, especially if you are trying to build a business through Twitter or through your content. Like, you should want to go viral just within your target audience. So if your target audience is CEOs of companies in certain industries, and you basically want to hire them to hire you as a consultant, maybe your target audience then is there's only 10,000 people in the entire world that fit that. So you should want to maximize the amount of people like that see your stuff. So maybe if your post gets 500 likes, but 10 of the people in your exact target audience sees it, likes it, and then takes some sort of action, like contacts you or signs up your email list, then that's a massive success. But it doesn't look like it if you're thinking that your post would get 10,000 likes. Yeah, and I think the best engagements I've had is when people, they basically want to get a few clients out of Twitter so we can grow their following. But if they're just meeting a couple of good clients on Twitter each month, then it's a success.
Yeah. I think, again, I've heard a guy called Jack Butcher talk about that, where initially, like, every piece of content to him would have been a success if it had just won him one client for his agency, right? And so that means that the bar to success is really low, actually. You might have originally looked at his account and think, oh, this is a guy trying to go viral. Actually, it's not. It's a guy trying to get one or two clients paying a few $1,000s a month for his agency. Ironically, what happened was it actually did strike a chord, his content, and it went on to be this thing with mass appeal and has turned into a much bigger business. But yeah, I think that's it's a really interesting framework and way of looking at content, and sensible one. One thing I'm really interested in is, particularly right now, is I've just started, you could call it a content agency, and I've got a couple of clients paying me a few £1,000s a month. How have you scaled your agency? And I'm particularly interested in how many clients could you get up to on your own? And then, like, how have you scaled above that? Because I think I can see that's like an immediate challenge for me. And probably for any kind of like new agency type owner.
I'll start out by saying I definitely don't have all the answers for that. I'm still figuring it out. And I think that's definitely the bottleneck for me still, because I have potential new clients that I could bring on that I want to stagger my new clients out. And I really haven't put a ton of effort into getting new clients besides the ones that either find me on Twitter or just referrals from current clients. I'm still figuring it out a bit. So what I've learned so far, my process has been that when I get a new client, I'm usually the one to just do everything from the beginning. So I'll come up with a strategy, figure out what the goals are, maybe come up with the first couple batches of content. And then once I've figured out what works, once the client is fairly happy and we're on the right track, then I'll try to bring on one of my writers to help me out with it. So I have a pool of probably 7 or 8 writers, all of them part-time, but I have ones that have different specialties, someone who knows real estate really well, someone who can do memes for stock and options trading, someone who does crypto. And that's what I've tried to do is find people that either know an area or they have an interest in it. Because I think that's the only way to make good content is the writer needs to understand the area that they're writing about. So what I've tried to do is once, maybe after a couple of weeks, if it's going well with a client, if we've made some progress, we're on the right track, then I'll try to bring someone on and say, hey, do you think you could help write for this client? And I usually, with all my writers, I try to make sure they're comfortable with the client, like that they feel like they'd have good ideas for them. And so then I'll just have them once a week write a bunch of ideas. They submit them to me once a week. I check them. I might add my own. I might edit it. Then we send it to the client. They give feedback once a week. And that's working fairly well. I wouldn't say it's like an infinitely scalable business. I think with this process right now, with the people we have, we could probably have, let's see. So we have about, I think, 14 clients right now. Probably could have 20 or 25 before we, I think the next major step would be, there'd probably need to be someone who's like a project manager. And that would probably need to happen at 20 or 25 clients, like a full-time person who, if I do the strategy for new clients, there needs to be someone who's managing the ongoing writing and client work. So that's probably where the model might break. And I would just need to add someone full-time to do that, make sure the assignments are getting out, make sure that we're actually doing the work for each client on a regular basis.
Yeah. And these writers that you're working with, you just said, I've got someone who's good at memes for like insurance. These are really niche people to find. Where do you find them? Are these just people on Twitter that you're reaching out to, or do they come to you? Are they on freelancer platforms?
Yeah, no, they're all on Twitter. So I found them all through people that follow me on Twitter. The first couple ones I hired, I just already knew them because I had chatted with them on Twitter. I knew that they were open to working with me because they'd either asked, or if I had mentioned it, they said they were interested. So I think just because almost every single client we're doing writing for, it's important to get people who understand the platform. So it's also just been super easy for me to find people on Twitter because I have tons of followers. People have been interested in the agency, especially with my personal account. I think I've tweeted twice in the last couple months, hey, who wants to help with me? And just those tweets have given me a pretty good backlog of people that are interested. So there's even some people I'm interested in hiring and I just don't have enough work, or it's just not the exact right time. Yeah, I think it's important I'm probably going to forever just source them from Twitter directly, because I think it'll be too hard to try to source someone from Upwork and then also filter for the fact that they have to know Twitter and they have to know the subject area of whichever client I'm going to have them help with.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing is, are there is this like a set product that you're delivering to people, or is every client different? How have you managed that? Yeah,
that's something so speaking of scale, that's something I've played with a bit, where at first I would just offer whatever the client wanted. I'd ask them what they want, and everything was pretty custom. Now I've gotten it pretty standard and I read up a bit on productized services. So basically turning a service or consulting type of thing into a specific product that you can repeatedly sell to different clients. So I've tried to turn it into that, where it's basically a monthly cost. The one thing is every single client is it on a bit of a different pricing, just depending on exactly how much volume they want in terms of the writing we do, and then also just how complicated it is. Obviously, if we're doing 25 tweets a week for someone who's like a meme page, that's probably going to take less time than someone who wants several really detailed threads about whatever, because then threads, we'll probably have to put an hour or two into research before we even start writing it. Yeah, so that's something I don't know if I would, as we continue to grow, if this pricing will be more standard, or if we'll have to, everyone wants something a little bit different, so we change the quote just depending on, number one, how long it'll take to do the work, and then also the volume that they want.
Yeah. And I think I've heard you say you think you can get it to 100K a month. Is that the plan, or?
Yeah, it is right now. Yeah, so I think it's totally doable. And I think, like I said, if we probably need to add a project manager to probably add some more processes around how we write for people. But I think it's pretty doable, and I think there's enough demand for it. I think, we're going to try and go for that and see how it works, see how bad everything breaks when we get to one too many clients. But the thing is, I think, I don't see any super obvious bottlenecks. Like, obviously, we'll need to get someone in there to help manage the projects, help create a little more structure, or at least uphold some sort of structure. But I think it's totally doable, and I think Yeah, I think
It's
the
a
other
wild
thing
story.
is,
It will be a wild story, man. It will be a wild story. Like just a meme account to 100K a month agency. It's pretty.
yeah, no,
It escalated
exactly.
quite quickly.
Exactly. I was going to say that, yeah, getting to 39K, that really took really only 5 months as a real business. Although you could say the business kind of started a little over a year ago, but I wasn't really, that's when I just had my couple of clients and I was basically just doing all the work. I wasn't really soliciting new clients.
Yeah.
I guess you could say it was, I think in December, that maybe you could call that like the first month of the business, we probably did 10 or 12,000 a month when I first started out, and I was just doing all of it.
Yeah, it's wild. What were you doing before this? And are you still doing another job, or have you gone all in on this?
No, I've gone all in on this. Yeah, I actually, January of 2021, I did. That's when before that, I was just working. I did a different consulting thing before that. I guess I'll go back further. My background was accounting and finance. So I did those degrees and got a master's in accounting like in 2017. And I worked as an analyst for a bit. And then I did a different consulting thing for a bit, a combo between working for my previous employer and just doing some other basic consulting. But it was fine. It, was okay money, but I wasn't like amazing at it. It wasn't really a growable business. So I think in January 2021, I was like, okay, I'll be making more just from having these two clients. And it's way more fun anyway. And I can continue growing the John Rich account. I can, see where it takes me from there. So yeah, I've been about a year and a half. I've been full time on this. It's been an awesome opportunity.
Yeah. And what about the other side to it? Because I think that's the other really interesting side. Is you've got this very unique character. I think he's got a newsletter, or at least an email list. Have you got any thoughts on that side, on what you could do there? Because there feels like there might be like a media play of some kind, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, a little bit. I've put that on hold just because it doesn't seem like the most lucrative and the most, I think there's a lot of friction with people really love my Twitter account, but I've been surprised at how low the conversion rate is to email. Or what I've found is that when I'll write those newsletters, I'll post them on Twitter, and a lot of people will like it and share it, but they don't necessarily sign up for the email list. It'll get maybe 10,000 views and 50 people will sign up for the email list, and which is fine. I think that's the thing. I don't really need to grow the email list a ton. I think what's been a better opportunity with Twitter is, number one, just meeting people. That basically the John Rich account is how I got most of my clients, is they basically could see that I knew what I was doing with Twitter. So it was easy for them to hire me because I already had this proof of, hey, I grew this big. The other thing is sponsorships. I haven't really done a ton, but even just doing a couple of them can be, now that I have a big following, can be some pretty good money. I think the email list, it's probably something the number one reason I should do it is that with Twitter, you never know, like you could be suspended for any reason basically, or the algorithm could change. So I probably do need to spend more effort on that. And there probably is some sort of play to, have it be more of a media company. But I think probably what I'm going to focus more on is making the media company around my agency, because that's probably what's going to be a lot more beneficial for me in the long run, rather than just trying to sell ads against John Rich's content. I think the problem is too, I've had more success getting people to sign up for my personal newsletter because I do think it's more valuable. I think people like to laugh, but they don't necessarily want to give their email. They can just find me on Twitter or Instagram and laugh there. They don't necessarily need another newsletter that also doesn't even help them with make money or anything like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Memes don't convert. That's the takeaway. Let's wrap up. Let's wrap up just with a couple of quick ones. Who are your favorite Twitter follows?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I would say Parikh is a really good one. My other ones, so there's a lot of smaller parody accounts that I would say Captain NASDAQ is a really good one to follow. He's the guy, he's Martin Shkreli is his picture. And let's see, a few others I'd say Thomas the Divorce Trader is probably one of my favorites as well. Stock Market Hats, he's a good one to follow. I also like one of my favorite things about Twitter is the rotating cast of just novel parody accounts that maybe aren't going to last forever, but they just, so obviously the Rich family, I think those are hilarious. And I think there's people that will just come up with the most ridiculous rich family member they possibly can, and then maybe a couple weeks later they'll change it to something else ridiculous. But I always get a laugh at seeing what people come up with for that. And I think the other one, I would say the prison investor is a really good one to follow. He's the guy who basically acts like, there's all these people on Twitter that say, oh, I invest in, multifamily real estate. Here's how I did it. This guy's a parody account that says, hey, I'm a private prison owner. Here's how I make money off of. So it's a good pair of the people that document how they make money on Twitter.
Yeah. I'll give a few of them a try. Favorite podcast?
I need to listen to more of them. I would say probably the Builders Build podcast is a good one. That's James Camp and Callum Landforce. They just talk about building content businesses, building websites. I like theirs a lot, and I'd say also Media Moves by Adam Ryan and Workweek. That's a good one, just about
I know
how the business of media.
Cool. All right. And lastly, where can people find you?
Yeah, on Twitter you can find Coked Up Options, or if you want to actually see me, you can look up Charlie W. Rich on Twitter. That's my username, but
sounds
Charlie
good, man.
Light, if you just search my actual name.
Yep. Awesome, man. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Yeah. No, thanks so much. I enjoyed it.